the H1N1 swine flu.
The outbreak is spread widely and cannot be contained.
We can contain spread of the
Influenza pandemics must be taken seriously.
A big outbreak of the deadly
Ebola virus has killed more. The Ebola outbreak that started in the West African country of Guinea has now spread.
People know nothing, there's no cure.
They don't have the resources to actually contain it.
Governments around the world are considering new measures.
And I'm calling from the New York City Health Department. Temperature reading from last night.
The U.S. Department of Agriculture confirmed another case of bird flu.
1.5 million state turkeys have been killed to prevent the spread of AIDS.
It is really critical that they control this.
You have to respond to the challenge.
3 latest victims of the new respiratory virus called MERS have come from Middle Eastern countries. They believe it originated in bats or camels.
Causes pneumonia and rapid kidney failure.
As the Zika virus continues to infect people across the globe.
The outbreak started in Brazil, suspected link to severe birth defects.
Zika typically is transmitted through mosquitoes.
When the weather starts to warm up, more of those mosquitoes could start coming north.
Because I believe there is such a thing as being too late.
There is a growing concern.
Our home. You can almost hear the biological chatter. Just when technology and science were supposed to make us safer, we suddenly seem more vulnerable to outbreaks.
Whether we like it or not, our world is globalizing ever more. And that's not only true for markets and for production, but it's also true for behaviors, for diseases. So we're more vulnerable because of our mobility. Secondly, we're far more people, and we're also living more and more in very crowded cities. That's fantastic from the perspective of a virus, because in no time it can infect hundreds of thousands of people.
Over the last 3 decades, there have been about 30 newly emerging diseases that have the potential to be pandemics. If we do nothing, it's not a matter of if there will be a global pandemic. It's just a matter of when and which virus and how bad.
The world changes around us at increasing speed. We cause a lot of that change. Migrating to cities, stripping the earth of its resources, and altering primeval jungle.
We are seeing whole entire ecologies, that which you can see with your eye and that which you can only see with a microscope. One system after another, completely reshaped.
Is there a sense where?
In every case, this affords opportunities for viruses and bacteria to seek out new homes, cause new havoc, including disease for human beings.
When contagion happens, life alters in an instant. We don't feel safe. We lose trust.
Fear spreads very quickly when you have an infectious disease outbreak. Communication is so much more pervasive. People know what's happening in another part of the world so much more quickly, so much more vividly than ever before. So the contagion of fear moves faster than the contagion of the pathogen, the disease itself, and the fabric of society starts to deteriorate.
There's something that destroys the soul of a community that happens when an epidemic is out of control. It's not just the large number of casualties and the deaths, which are itself unthinkable, but it's what it does to the social fabric of a community or a nation.
The war lasted for 14 years. I was quite little, but I still remember vividly everything that I saw. Sometimes you're playing at night when the place is dark, you can see these bullets flying like bolts of lightning across the sky. You can physically see them. My father would bundle all of us up and we hear the opposite direction. Huh? You know the bullets are coming from this way because you hear the sound coming. And you see the soldiers going that way to go and fight it. So you know you have to go the other way. But look at Ebola. How are you going to protect yourself? You have an enemy you cannot hide from. I mean, you cannot run from Ebola. Where are you going to go? Who are you going to run to?
We got confirmation yesterday that 2 are positive with Ebola virus. It is here.
Ebola is transmitted through bodily fluids, saliva, blood, urine, feces. This is an invisible foe.
Ebola first surfaced in West Africa in a remote rural community. But in our increasingly connected world, this Ebola outbreak didn't stay in the countryside. The virus quickly found its way to the region's largest cities and health systems that were completely unprepared.
I graduated from med school 2 years ago. The reason why I'm here is by default because I was the only one available. I'm a general practitioner, and I got 1-day training to get prepared for this.
Mohamed Kamara, come, sit down for me. Momo.
When we started admission on August 17, the following morning, there were ambulances lined up at the gates. And to tell you the truth, we're not prepared.
Can you outlet the car? 1, 2, 3, 4. How many patients going?
Before we even knew it, we were already overwhelmed with so many patients.
How many patients you got on board? You can't take 4. We just took 7. We have only 9 spaces. So I will take 1 or 2 and go check if I can create space. I'll take the other 2. If no way, you have to take them away.
It used to give me that impression I was in Hades. Because it was a makeshift structure. The patients are vomiting, bleeding, and having diarrhea on the floor. Among them, you'll see 2, 3 persons have already died and the bodies are still there. They're waiting removal. In 3 days' time, the entire unit was full. Meanwhile, there were still patients waiting outside the gate. And they are begging. Every time we go to the gate, they are begging to come in.
This is a serious situation. We have 35 beds and already have 71 patients on the ward. That means 50% of the patients are lying on the floor. There's no space on the floor to put a mattress in any longer.
You don't have beds, but you're facing a group of people who are dying. You know they are dying. You see they are very sick, they're so weak. But what if they go home? What about the taxi cab these patients are going to ride to go home to die? Everyone in the taxi gets infected. Then what about the home, the community these people go into? So maybe we should just open the gate and let them come and lie on the floor to die.
Open the gate!
So we just open the gate and just let them in, sometimes 16 persons, sometimes 20 persons. and we'll be there for 3, 4, 5 hours trying to give them fluids, antibiotics, and other medicines. And then it never ends. As you are walking out, a new patient is walking in. And then when you go home and come back the following morning, there are 7, 8 deaths overnight.
I think we all underestimated, absolutely everybody. I know that one case of Ebola is an emergency. Every new case can give rise to more cases. So it's really act now or pay later.
Right now, the World Health Organization and other doctors are saying it is out of control in this area of West Africa. It's the worst outbreak ever that they've recorded in this part of the world.
It's unprecedented for several reasons. One, first time in West Africa that we have such an outbreak. Secondly, this is the first time that 3 countries are involved. And thirdly, it's the first time that we have outbreaks in capitals, in capital cities.
This could explode into a really mega crisis.
I think so, and it is already a mega crisis.
I really thought, how can this epidemic be controlled in the usual way when there are so many outbreaks in different places? The 3 countries in West Africa that are affected by the Ebola outbreak have some of the worst health indicators in the world. There are not enough doctors, there are not enough nurses. It is a system that is understaffed, underfunded, and where the infrastructure is very, very old.
Let's go back to 1976 when you were a younger man and you actually co-discovered this virus. It was in Zaire,
yes,
now the Democratic Republic of the Congo.
And they said that there was a mysterious epidemic. This was very lethal, high mortality. There were nuns who had died. A small group would go to the mission where the epidemic had started, apparently. They asked for volunteers, and I think I was about the first one to raise my hand. Although I had absolutely zero experience in doing this.
Mesdames, Messieurs, ensuite nous poursuivons nos programmes avec un documentaire à l'hôpital de Yamoussoukro.
Our mission was to put in place some basic measures to contain it, and using quarantine, that's what we thought. And 2, to find out how is this transmitted. Because that's the key to stop epidemics, to know exactly what the risk is, how is it transmitted. It's really a detective work. So we tested whole villages, talked to the population, and then have a very primitive questionnaire. How old, where have they been, have they traveled? And what we found was that there were very few survivors, very few, and that indeed so what we call case fatality rate was over 90%. Nearly all new viruses come from animals. I mean, we're also an animal. We're, human primates. So during the outbreak, we started collecting samples from all kinds of animals. I even took blood from pigs because a number of pigs had died at the beginning of the epidemic. So we said, you never know. But we didn't find any trace of Ebola. My boss at the time, Stefan Patijn, had always told me, watch out for the bats. And it became a bit of a joke. But the old man was right, because the only reservoir that we think where Ebola is hiding are some kind of fruit-eating bats.
When I was a child, I really liked to read all these, science fictions. I realized science really fantastic. You can't find something new. So this is why I'm working on the emerging and re-emerging bacteria and viruses. I think for the Ebola, when you put all the data together, the transmission rules or cycle is clear. So definitely it's from bats. And then you have an intermediate host. It could be some mammals in the African region, and then to the human beings. I could also be directly from bats to humans. You can see Ebola, SARS, and MERS, all these viruses, they are from bats. So bats is a very serious problem.
If we look around the world, we can see that bat populations are being severely stressed by climate change. Some of them because they live in the upper tiers of rainforests and feed on wild fruit. But the upper tiers of the rainforests are getting the most impact of this heat increase and increased UV radiation. Add to that humans are encroaching into the rainforests, into bat habitats, precious caves. They're very shy creatures. They do not seek you out, no matter what vampire movies you ever saw. As humans encroach, we see more and more bat populations starving and coming into human habitation areas to feed on our agricultural production. And in the process, they're passing their virus on to other animals and to humans. We are imposing changes in the microbial world willy-nilly, thoughtlessly, and we do so at our peril.
We have dramatically increased our contact with animals in a variety of ways. Through deforestation, industrialization of agriculture, and vastly increased consumption of animals. HIV spread out of Africa from a few monkeys and chimpanzees to infect millions of people on every continent. SARS jumped from a bat to a civet cat to a villager in China to more than 30 countries in a matter of weeks. Animal and human health are completely linked. In the 21st century, 75% of all new infectious diseases have come from animals. Sometimes directly, in other cases through intermediaries like mosquitoes.
If anyone had sat down and done, a fantasy hit parade of emerging diseases that might come to the Americas from Africa or from Asia, Zika would never have even been on the list. Zika virus originated in Africa and had never been off the African continent until it started making its way across Asia and South Pacific, ending up in French Polynesia and Yap. Yap is a small place that most people have never heard of, but when Zika hit it, 70% of the population got infected. That was really quite startling if anybody had been paying attention.
But they weren't. Zika jumped from the South Pacific to Brazil in 2013, 2 years before it was identified there. The timeline corresponds to an increase in travel between the South Pacific and Brazil, including visitors who attended a pre-World Cup soccer tournament, the Confederation Cup.
Someone was carrying the Zika virus, and some mosquitoes bit that individual, absorbed the virus, and that's the beginning of this saga. And then undoubtedly the El Nino weather event provided the necessary ingredients, rainfall and drought, that fundamentally changed the conditions on the ground and allowed for the spread of this virus.
Calma. Na frente de casa tem também o esgoto a céu aberto, porque nós não temos saneamento. Só tem mato e muito pernilongo. Foi por isso que ficou fácil para que eu pegasse. Pegar ele para fazer o almoço dele. Pode ficar aqui, Amanda. Não sou. João Guilherme nasceu com microcefalia.
Tô com o pulmão cheio de novo.
De novo. Ela disse que ele continuasse assim, eu levasse ele para emergência. A parte mais difícil, primeiro, foi quando ele nasceu. Porque quando eu vi o meu pitoquinho desse tamanhinho, com a cabeça toda enrugada, eu choro 1.500 vezes.
Foi?
Deus tocou meu coração, foi amor imediato. Tudo tá girando em torno dele. O almoço de João. Quando eu olho para ele, quando ele ri, quando ele levanta a cabeça, é muito intenso, é muito diferente, porque minhas filhas, eu sabia que elas iam me dar isso naturalmente. E João é uma busca muito grande para que ele pegue um objeto, para que ele olhe para você, né? Para tudo. É isso. Bora passear. Vamos pra floresta. Cadê mamãe? Olha. Pega o brinquedo. Aqui. Sim. Pega o brinquedo. Pega. Sim, coisa linda. Que coisa mais linda. Sim. Segura. Sim, segurou.
In 2015, the Zika virus suddenly spread across Brazil, primarily through the bite of one type of mosquito. The medical establishment only began to comprehend Zika's danger as the number of babies born with the birth defect microcephaly started to dramatically increase.
No meio de setembro, e começaram, num dia só eu cheguei a ver 3 pacientes com microcefalia. E a partir daí eu comecei a ver, toda semana tinha pelo menos um caso de microcefalia. Foi quando eu passei um WhatsApp para o grupo de neuropediatras. Pessoal, estamos notando um aumento de casos de microcefalia. Se vocês estiverem notando também em outro serviço, provavelmente a gente vai tentar investigar. Então, a partir daí, a gente começou a acompanhar essas crianças e aí o volume, a cada semana, começou a aumentar. De repente, você ter... Aqui no nosso centro, a gente tem acompanhando em torno de 200 novos casos. Eu nunca tinha passado por nenhuma situação de epidemia tão grave em que acometesse uma população de uma maneira tão rápida e grave.
Sim, princesa. Valentina. Ei.
Microcefalia é o que a gente vê. O bebê nasce e a gente vê que a cabeça é pequena.
Tá 36 agora. Eu vou botar no gráfico ali pra você ver. Pode pegá-la.
A doença em si é uma coisa muito maior do que isso.
Não tem medo de reflexo voltado.
Isso é o quadro que a gente vê que chama mais atenção, ou seja, um comprometimento cefálico na medula e um comprometimento ocular.
Since the alarm went sounding around the world from Brazil, we have seen almost every day another revelation about this virus. What we now know is that this is a very dangerous virus. We grossly underestimated it. It is malaria in that it is transmitted by mosquitoes and can cause enormous outbreaks. It is HIV in that it is sexually transmitted. And it's worse than all of the above as we come to understand what this virus actually lives on. Where does the virus go in a pregnant woman? It goes into this tiny forming creature, the fetus, and it feeds on it and reinfects back into the mother's bloodstream over and over again. And what is it feeding on in that fetus? Baby brain cells. And so every single part of the brain of that developing child is damaged.
The Zika virus affects its victims in a completely different way from the Ebola virus. What they share in common is how fast they can move, randomly attacking some while sparing others. Some epidemics grab our attention, while others, in spite of the larger number of victims, remain more hidden.
All the time on your hometown station, and of course adding in some holiday music. Oh, it's so close. Local note that passed along to you that those in need of a flu shot may still get them. Walk-ins are welcome at the Steel Center Public Health weekdays between 8 and 4.
Owatonna, Minnesota. It's a beautiful town. To me, it's like Mayberry RFD, Opie Taylor's town.
The name Owatonna comes from an Indian princess that was sick, and the chief brought her here because of the healing waters.
When we moved here, it just felt like home. I think we got lucky. The good Lord just gave us two good kids.
3, do something too.
Sarah was always the princess, and Shannon was opposite. She was a tomboy. She loved skateboarding, and she loved video games.
Shannon, she's a complete surprise. Sarah was almost 16, and I was 40. She was a joy. Right from the get-go, she was a joy for everybody.
But we were a tight family.
Her first time out by herself. Oh my gosh.
I remember when she got a permit, she was just so tickled.
She goes by herself.
So I was so proud of her.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Somebody's driving. Catch some snowflakes. Hi, girl. Oops. Oh, hi.
Shannon was in her senior year of high school.
She came home Wednesday night, said, I think I got the flu at school.
That was Wednesday, and Thursday she just seemed to be, baseline for being sick. But she wasn't getting better. And that's when Terry and I agreed that we've got to take her.
When I took her that Sunday to go to the hospital, we waited 2 hours. It was that packed. That's when I knew there was a big epidemic of flu going on. And she's sitting next to me, and she's got her head on me. And I took a selfie, sent it to her mom, saying we're still waiting.
The doctor said it was just the flu, that it had to run its course. They gave her some cough medicine just for comfort. And Terry went and got it. Well, I got her back up in her bed. It's about 5 o'clock in the morning. I was sitting in the living room, and I heard her moving around upstairs. I thought, wow, she's getting out of bed. I got up and I went to the coffee maker, and I saw in my peripheral that she got up and she went into the bathroom. She tapped on the shower curtain, and I said, "You want to take a shower?" And she nodded yes. I said, "Okay." I was filling the water up, and I got about so full. She laid back, but her knees kept buckling. And, you know, she kept pushing on the end of the tub to keep herself from sliding under. And then I saw her eyes. And I pounded on the wall and woke Terry up.
Said she's not breathing, and I come running down, and I still remember her on the floor, her mom giving her CPR.
I'd never had to do that before. And it's nothing like they teach you in class.
All I could do is dial 911.
911, what's going on there?
My daughter is 17 years old. She's not breathing.
She's not breathing?
Not breathing.
Okay, I'm sending the paramedics to help you now. Just stay on the line with me, okay?
Breathe, Shannon. Oh, Lord. Come on in. She's right in there. Go ahead.
And I don't remember any kind of time passing. I just remember a pair of blue pants that kneeled down on the other side of her, and he told me they'd take over, and I stepped away.
Even when they said we're flying her to Rochester, you know, I waved at the helicopter, you know, thinking everything's fine. I had no clue.
You know, and when they told us that she didn't make it, and I said, "I want to see her," and they said, "You never recognize her for what we've had to do to her." Because the flu actually killed all of her organs long before she actually died. I still think she ought to be coming home.
The biggest pain in the world as a parent is losing their child. This is the most unnatural thing to happen to a human being. And you stand next to it and you think, my goodness, I am there to prevent this from happening, and sometimes I cannot. And sometimes I don't know why I cannot.
Nehmervertretern besonders übel aufgestoßen, dass da ein VW-Chef.
The question of how and why one particular person may die from influenza is the million-dollar question that we absolutely need to tackle.
It is surprising how much we still need to learn about flu, a disease which causes worldwide epidemics every year.
She had a little raspiness in her chest.
The flu test came back positive. I actually remember saying, okay, it's just the flu, like it was no big deal.
It spreads across the globe, hospitalizing 3 to 5 million.
And within 24 hours, she was intubated.
Le cœur a fini par repartir, mais alors à ce moment-là, mon cœur était sous joie, quoi.
Killing at least 200,000 every year.
We went in as they were coding her.
My baby girl, Scarlett Ann, pronounced dead.
The majority of the adult influenza patients have something that we call a risk factor. They have very weak immune system, or they have diabetes or obesity. Pregnant women have a risk for both themselves as well as the child. Okay, we know these factors, but this is a virus that can mess up your body to a degree that even the most healthy, young, and happy, playful person is taken away from this planet within a couple of days.
Every year, we struggle to fight seasonal flu. But what experts are really afraid of is a new strain of flu. one that the human population hasn't been exposed to before. One that almost no one will have any immunity against.
When we think about the threat of a disease spreading around the world as a pandemic threat, obviously airborne infections are at the very top. Things like SARS and flu are something that we know is difficult to control because of the way it spreads through aerosols. Most people become infectious with the flu before they even have symptoms. Anybody can travel clearly across the world with an infectious disease incubating in them without them even knowing that they're sick yet.
In 2009, a new flu emerged, H1N1, also known as swine flu. We now know it first appeared in the US, in the pig industry, initially infecting people at state and county fairs. In a little over a year, swine flu infected around 1.3 billion people. It was the most common shared experience on Earth. Flu poses a strong pandemic threat because it has the ability to be both very contagious and very deadly. Threat.
Like this room is only flu.
Yeah.
What we're most worried about right now is this bird flu that we know is highly pathogenic.
Whereas this virus, the H5N1, kills between 50 and 60% of the people that it infects.
Currently, this deadly new bird flu doesn't spread easily between people. But it is spreading rapidly among wild birds and poultry. Experts are afraid this could be a pandemic threat.
It's a live poultry market, so the birds are alive. And when they're sold alive because people value the fact that it's very fresh meat. So you buy your chicken or your duck alive, and then it is killed and cleaned, and emptied, of course, eviscerated. The viscera go into some of these buckets here, and then the birds are put in hot water and then put in these drums where these little plastic tubings help get rid of the feathers. And then when the birds have been defeathered, eviscerated, and cleaned, then they're cut up and they're given back to the person who bought it. The issue here is that the water is the same to clean all the ducks and chickens. The other issue is that these people are wading in viscera, feathers, and the water that's served to clean them. So there's really a lot of virus here.
In 2011, when the Pasteur Institute started monitoring the wash water, 18% of the water samples were positive for H5N1. 4 years later, 66% of samples were positive.
We know that bird flu is very, very deadly. And we know swine flu spreads very quickly. What we worry about is if those two reassort, and then we could have a new strain that literally could spread as quickly as the swine flu did, but have the mortality rate of bird flu. That's the big fear, that we have now literally created the petri dish that we all worried about, and both of those viruses are sitting in there at the same time.
Pandemics are one of the biggest risks we face. This is an issue of human lives. It should be thought of in the same way that we think of terrorism, protection against national disasters, against national defense. This is a human security issue, and it is also an economic security issue.
The outbreak of SARS could trigger a global downturn.
Fear
of the SARS virus has caused serious financial damage to businesses, cities, even entire countries.
During the height of SARS, nobody was going to restaurants, people didn't want to go shopping. At one point at the peak of the SARS crisis, air travel into Hong Kong was down by 80% and retail sales were down by 50%. Businesses began to run out of money. Estimates of the impact of SARS have been for an economic impact of around 40 billion or so. If a global pandemic took place, you're looking at an economic impact measured in the trillions of dollars, not tens or hundreds of billions. It has such a big impact on business and life.
You hope the world has the capacity to see an outbreak, mobilize forces, and contain it, right? Unfortunately, we rarely do that, especially if the outbreak occurs in a poor country.
Well, here we are in Liberia. That's Sierra Leone. And this is the border crossing. Do you see security? Do you see any military? Do you see anything that would stop someone from coming across this border?
And then it not only spreads beyond the borders of the original country, as occurred with Ebola in West Africa, but it crosses seas. It crosses continents, and that constitutes a pandemic. Endemic is your worst case scenario. So you failed to control the outbreak, you failed to control the epidemic, and you failed to control the pandemic. And now that microbe is a permanent feature in the biological landscape that humans are living in. The worst example of that is HIV. We started off with tiny outbreaks in a handful of places, and the world responded completely incorrectly. It became pandemic and now endemic. So we have 37 million people living infected with HIV, and there is no country on the planet without this virus.
Before the devastation of AIDS, there was smallpox. Smallpox killed 500 million people in the 20th century alone. More than all the wars in that century combined. Whenever an infectious disease truly catches hold, it forces health workers to make impossible choices about the public's freedom and rights.
I was the youngest person in the smallpox team, and I was certainly the only person in the history of the United Nations recruited from the Neem Karoli Baba ashram. We had eradicated smallpox in Madhya Pradesh, which is a big state in the middle of India. And we were about to do our victory dance, and then suddenly, from across the border, we started getting new outbreaks. And they all came from one place, a place called Tatanagar. First place we went to was the railway station. And it was a scene from the worst nightmare you ever had in your life. There were dozens of people stretched out near the tracks, in the waiting room, on the cement, dead from smallpox. It smelled from the death. The Tata Nagar was the home of the Tata Iron and Steel Company. So I just went to the company's house. It was almost midnight when I got there. I said, I need jeeps, I need managers, I need doctors, I need vaccine. The next day, I had 100 jeeps. We set up training programs. We used maps to develop a strategy, and we took the 100 jeeps and we built our little army. We were doing great. We found 2,000 cases of smallpox. We were stopping the disease in Tatanagar, but still, as we're vaccinating everybody, the trains were carrying people away. We're still exporting smallpox. We closed the railway station, we closed the buses, we quarantined the city of 600,000 people. Nobody could leave the city unless they were vaccinated. We eliminated smallpox in that entire area around Tatanagar in less than 6 months. But it kept coming back. We traced it to a tribal group called the Ho tribe. So I went and visited the members of that tribe, and I said, well, you've got to take smallpox vaccine. You've got to stop this transmission. And he said, I won't take it. I do whatever God's will is. And if I'm to get smallpox, I'll get it. After a while, more cases kept coming out from the Ho community, and we all agreed that we were going to have to forcibly vaccinate these Ho tribesmen. In the middle of the night, we went out into the villages, into the jungle, and we surrounded them and pulled them out of their houses, and we vaccinated them. And then after we had broken into their house, pulled them out of bed, forcibly vaccinated them, this dignified tribal elder looked at me and reached over to the vine, and there was one fruit, a cucumber, a kind of gourd. He pulled it off, and he cut it, and he put it on a leaf, and he offered it to us to eat. He said, I don't like what you did. I think you're wrong. But that's over now. Now I see that you are a guest in my house. The only thing I have to offer is this cucumber. And so you ask yourself, were we right? We did a lot of things that in their individual isolation, if I put the harshest light of truth on it right now, I would be begging to find an alternative way to do it. And I asked myself, did I exaggerate the importance of what I did? Did I place myself above some kind of moral compass? Did I quit too early trying to find a way to accomplish the same thing? But that's sort of between, right now, me and God and me and my conscience. Smallpox has been eradicated. And I'm thrilled about that.
The idea of night raids or forcible vaccination today is just unthinkable. There's a few big things that are very different. Internal politics, global politics, extremism, the whole issue of human rights. You have to be transparent because the wrong information can actually contribute to the spread of a disease. I'm particularly interested in looking at rumors. The way that rumors replicate and spread are very similar to how viruses spread. They need a host, they need to be supported to stay alive and thrive.
Oh, there we go.
There we are. Okay. Hi. Rumors have been around since man existed, but I think right now what's changed with technology, and particularly social media and the internet, is the global spread and the speed. I mean, look at Twitter. You need 140 characters or something. And that's all you need to spread some of the rumors and perceptions that we're certainly tracking. And one of the things we found is that rumors thrive in times of uncertainty. They thrive in times where people need an answer, are eager for an answer.
The old model of how you respond to an infectious disease outbreak is you issue some sort of, firm warning to the public and tell them what they should and shouldn't do. That doesn't work anymore because people are responding to rumors on Twitter or Facebook, and they want to engage and they want to challenge and they want to have their own opinions about what's going on.
pen. The agenda. Okay, go for it. When an epidemic occurs, there is the clinical management, but there's also the reactions of society. And managing that can be as important as actually dealing with the epidemic itself. Okay, good afternoon, everybody. This is the third meeting of our task force on Ebola. And but John, would you like to give an update? Because where we are with the epidemic, I'm very worried, to be honest.
President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf likened the outbreak to a war.
Cases and deaths continue to surge. Riots are breaking out.
As Ebola continued to spread across West Africa, the governments implemented massive quarantines. Distrust exploded.
Security forces blocked roads with scrap wood and barbed wire.
An angry mob forced open an isolation wall.
Hundreds clashed with the police, who fired live rounds and tear gas.
Liberia has tried. We've used our own resources, but obviously we have limitations, and we hope that the international community see this as an international catastrophe.
2 Americans who have been infected
will be sent home for care in Atlanta.
Manuel García Viejo dio positivo en el test de detección del virus y fue trasladado a España.
William Corey became infected whilst working as a nurse in eastern Sierra Leone.
A news photographer for NBC just diagnosed with Ebola.
Much like the other Americans before him, he will be flown back to the United States for treatment.
That's him?
Mm-hmm.
Oh my God. He's from West Africa, right?
No, he's from the States.
He's from
here.
the States?
He's in America.
Oh my God.
In a repeating pattern, the world only really started to pay attention to the Ebola epidemic when foreign workers began to fall sick.
The international response is continuing to ramp up.
We're going to create an air bridge to get health workers and medical supplies into West Africa faster.
Over €1 billion across Europe will be galvanized.
La France a consacré 35 millions d'euros. China is sending healthcare professionals.
中国政府将向西非国家抗击埃博拉疫情提供第4轮援助。
There are 84 flights a week leaving these affected countries.
The first time the Ebola virus is in the United States.
Thomas Duncan contracted Ebola in Liberia before flying to Dallas, Texas.
He lied on his exit form so he could leave Liberia.
Why not just shut down the flights and secure the border?
A travel ban may make sense.
We should not be allowing these folks in, period.
As of today, 1 case came from Liberia. 1. Now, there'll be more, but right now, 1. And in response to that, they say, let's close the borders. Nobody from Africa will be allowed in. They don't even know where West or East or South Africa is. Nobody from Africa should be allowed in. And close our airports. I mean, that's a combination of ignorance and arrogance that could create ruination for our economic system, our financial system.
Please be advised that a healthcare worker who lives in your area has tested positive for the Ebola virus.
Today, testing confirmed that a patient here in New York City had tested positive for Ebola.
Craig Spencer treated Ebola patients in Guinea.
12 hours before he detected his fever, he was in an Uber car, he was on the L train, he was on the A train, he was on the 1 train, he went to 2 bowling alleys, and he ate at a restaurant, as no quarantine was required. Late this afternoon, the governors of New York and New Jersey decided to change that.
After returning from treating Ebola patients in Sierra Leone, Casey Hickox was forcibly quarantined, even though she tested negative for Ebola twice.
We have the legal authority to do it. We're doing it.
It was pretty clear that the United States epidemic was overwhelmingly an epidemic of fear. We got a practice run on how Americans will respond. And boy, we got an F.
We're spending a lot of time
with the community.
Until we rid our beloved country of this dreadful unwanted guest, Ebola.
Community leaders with our colleagues to assess how to better handle this Ebola epidemic.
My big question, and I guess it is the concern of everybody here, is this a wake-up call for you, also the international community, to start looking at other potential viruses that may come to harm us, as vulnerable as we are in the future, so that we start putting things in place now for us to prevent us getting those type of situations?
Well, to be honest, in this 38 years, we have collectively failed. And every time when there's a big epidemic, we say, oh, never again, and we are going to, put in place mechanisms to do this and that, and it doesn't happen. And so we have to now really fight that this will happen this time and that there are better systems in place.
In the fall of 2014, significant aid and manpower finally started arriving in the region. In Liberia, there were contingents from Médecins Sans Frontières, China, Cuba, Germany, Sweden, and the United States.
We now have 3 weeks more. This is extrapolation. This is extrapolation. This is not survival.
It was chaotic, and coordination was often difficult. But makeshift ETUs were finally replaced with purpose-built field hospitals.
I communicated with the ministry that JFK should close down. So we just transferred the team from JFK to MOD.
Ali, check this. The scrub slippers and clean and the boosted. The extra boost in my office, I don't know who got it.
I created something called coordination team.
Oh, good morning. Yesterday, I started getting complaints. There were 2 patients that were brought to the triage, and they were lying down in the triage here for more than an hour, waiting to be taken onto the ward, and the nurses were informed. I mean, every patient that come here, think about your relative being in that position. You don't treat patients like that. You can't have patients waiting in the triage for 1 hour, before they get care. We need to be vigilant about it.
I've seen so many people die, then sometimes I'm afraid of being a medical doctor. One laboratory technician working for us at JFK got infected. Then my hygienist, who got into a physical fight before the patient, became infected. Then 2 securities got infected at home. Then Dr. Scarlett got infected. After I joined JFK, 3 intern doctors came, including Scarlett. Dr. Scarlett always wanted to walk side by side in a unit with me. And when everyone else is tired and walking out and I'm in for 4 or 5 hours, Dr. Scarlett, they will stay. I mean, this was the perfect friend, the perfect colleague. One day, he took the day off, and then that evening, I called him to see how he was doing. And he said, Doc, you know what? This evening, I just had sudden chills. I said, shh. I said, okay, keep it calm, come to the unit, and we'll take a sample. That night, the first thing Scarlett did was to call me. He said, Dr. Moses, guess what? My result came back acute positive. I started to cry, started to shed tears. Then I told him, I'll do everything in my power to make sure you are okay. I will get an ambulance. And then the ambulance came, they received him, they took him in. They did everything they could do for him. They managed to preserve him that night. I kept calling all through the night. I didn't get him, he didn't talk to me. The following morning, he just dropped and died. He just dropped and died. just drop and die. Yeah. Many patients have survived our unit. But up to now, when I think about it, I feel like I've done nothing. I mean, I didn't save Scotland.
Her whole family got Ebola. It died to survive. A cat, a rat, on a mat, a fat cat sat on the mat. After I survived, I voluntarily decided to give care to these children. Hello, everybody. Lunch is ready. Can we go and have our lunch? These children are here because they lost their relatives from Ebola, and the community are afraid of them to take care of them because the community think that in taking care of these children, they are risking their life. Since we as survivors, we cannot infect them and we cannot get infected by them. So these children are brought here to be on a quarantine. In entering the home, they can really be afraid. Not wanting to talk to anybody, not wanting to share their problem. They don't know who to trust. But as time goes by, while talking to them, one-on-one, hearing our stories, they start talking back to us.
When Ebola ends, everything is going to change. Families are apart for good. My daughter is 4 years old. I call her my best friend on earth. And my son is also very brilliant, energetic, lovely boy. Because I was so afraid of them becoming infected, I had to stay away from them for a long while.
How are you?
People only see the deaths, but the consequences are far more than that. In Africa, we eat together. We drink from one cup, we share from one spoon, and then we eat from the same plate. How many persons want to do that now? So Ebola is not only killing us, but it's destroying all of our cultures and traditions and reducing our hope for the future.
When we are talking about the prevention of the emerging virus, it's 3 factors important: early identification, precision of the diagnosis, and immediate action.
What are you guys doing here, George?
We're trying to find some small molecules or some antibodies to inhibit the pseudovirus of Ebola virus to enter the cells.
The 21st century can be characterized by a race between the dangers of modernization and the advances. Our only chance of winning the race is to use 21st century tools to fight epidemics, ideally even to prevent them with vaccines.
Viruses are bad, but in terms of research, they provide incredible tools to understand ourselves. They have been with us for millions and millions of years of evolution. So if we can ask the right questions, then we may be able to find out some useful information.
Adolfo is here?
Yes, he is. Come right on in.
We have surveillance projects. We are trying to isolate virus from humans, from animals, from swine, from birds, taking virus samples to find out what are the mechanisms for spread, immunity, virulence, and then vaccine designs.
When you are talking about vaccine development, we know even less for flu than we know for the Ebola. So we need to have a universal flu vaccine soon. So everybody is working on that.
Georgie, can you show me the slides that you have prepared?
These are the slides.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Currently, we create a new flu vaccine every year, adjusting it to match the circulating strains of flu. It takes months to make that vaccine.
Yeah, it looks quite nice.
What scientists are trying to develop is a universal flu vaccine, one that could work against all strains of flu, seasonal and pandemic.
Right now, it takes at least 9 months to develop a vaccine. That's too much time. If there is a pandemic, a lot of people will die before a vaccine is ready.
One flag or
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like this? Okay, goodbye.
All right.
Hope to
Good.
see you soon. Yeah. The problem is not just vaccines. We also need better diagnosis.
Better diagnostics are critical to preventing outbreaks from becoming epidemics. We frequently misdiagnose influenza. And initially in the field, we misidentified both Ebola and Zika, confusing them with other diseases. We lost valuable time to contain them.
Thank you. You have been identified.
This is the area where we have a lot of the diagnostic machinery that we're working on. So the general idea is your sample is going to get placed in here, and it will run across the chip. You close it up, and then the cartridge can sit right here. Right now, the run time is somewhere in the order of half an hour. So what you can see on the screen here, this is the intact virus. Maybe it's Ebola, maybe it's influenza, maybe it's Zika. You could imagine it being useful in your doctor's office. You can imagine it being useful in an airport, or you can imagine somebody wanting to bring it to a triage site if there is some disaster or some outbreak.
E nós estamos perdendo a luta contra o mosquito. Nós temos de nos mobilizar para ganhar a luta.
Today, the president of Brazil gave public health officials the right to enter any home or business to try to eradicate mosquito breeding grounds.
Cases of the Zika virus have been reported in dozens of countries across Southern and Central America. Already, Puerto Rico is in the crosshairs of the virus.
Nosotros tenemos registrado como sospechoso como 4.500, pero pensamos que es un poco más.
Deberían considerar posponer el embarazo.
Scientists are still trying to understand the full range of neurological effects the Zika virus causes in both babies and adults.
Florida officials have finally found the Zika virus in mosquitoes in the Miami area.
People are scared. Cases of Zika rose from 4,000 to, by some estimates, over 16,000. Can you imagine, colleagues, the fear and anxiety in this chamber if these 100 mosquitoes were outside this jar, not inside this jar?
A lot of folks talk about protecting Americans from threats. Well, Zika is a serious threat to Americans.
Zika is spreading rapidly around the world. At least 49 countries or territories in the Western Hemisphere have local Zika transmission.
We're already seeing mosquitoes transmitting Zika in the United States. It's really just a question of how many states, how widespread, and how many people will acquire infection as a result. We are not prepared for Zika. Every outbreak, we go to the Capitol Hill folks and beg. And every outbreak, it becomes very political. In the United States, there are a patchwork of laws that guide health. There's no consistency in the level of funding or urgency or training or expertise. Am I allowed as a public health official to go on your front lawn, your private property, and spray insecticide? In some cities, yes. In some cities, no. Am I allowed to force you, compel you, to drain a swampy-like condition in your backyard because it's breeding mosquitoes? Again, there's no consistent law. Public health is a two-way trust. I have to trust that government's going to do the job. But government can't do the job of public health unless the public is engaged. If government says mosquitoes are here and they're carrying a really dangerous disease, we need to come on your property, we need to have access to ways to eradicate those mosquitoes, and you say, I believe in the Second Amendment, nobody's coming on my property, then there's no trust and there's no public health. And similarly, if there's an epidemic that involves a vaccine, government doesn't line your children up. You line your children up. And if you're not willing to do so, then you're not part of the trust that is the basis of public health. If there's one hallmark of my lifetime on this planet, it is the erosion of trust in government. And public health is paying a price at every level for that erosion of trust.
Each year, Terry gets the vaccine. I don't get it. And we gave Shannon the choice, and she chose not to. I'm trying to understand the flu vaccine because I want to know if we'd got Shannon vaccinated, if it might have saved her life. There's so much information on the internet. I can go to 30 different websites and get 30 different answers. You don't know who to trust.
There is something about the flu vaccine that conjures confusion. While not currently a perfect tool, and varying in effectiveness from year to year, over the last decade, the flu vaccine reduces the risk of getting the flu by at least 50%. It also reduces hospitalizations and deaths.
A little over a year ago, a mom that lost a little girl put together a Facebook page and she titled it Flu Moms. And when she hears of another mom or somebody finds us, they join. Here's a mom. She had a booth at a fair, and all of our children were pictured. There's Shannon. And when children came to the booth to get their faces painted, then the parents standing there waiting would get the information. They'd be told about these children who have died and the importance of vaccination, that kind of thing. We have a new mom, Julia. Not wonderful to be part of a flu mom group, but it's great that we all are here for one another. Shoot. We'll learn her story pretty soon.
There's a huge amount of parents that are just utterly confused. And that's a big communication challenge when it comes to the vaccine. So the question is, does she have anything now?
Yeah, she knows.
Vaccine hesitancy is something that we observe to be on the rise, which is quite alarming. Influenza is actually possibly preventable with the vaccine. That's great. But nobody uses it. That's not great. One of the most common misperceptions about the flu vaccine is that people say, you know what, I'm in my best years, I'm healthy, never been sick. But there's another aspect to vaccines, obviously, and that's not just me, it's also the people around me. Because of the potential of me giving something to somebody that may be serious to them, even if it may not be serious to me at this moment. And I may very well sit in the subway next to somebody who has a very weak immune system. And they may not even know it, and I may not know it, but I may very well give somebody the flu. So there's the question of the common good versus the individual good. If we want any effectiveness of a vaccine, we need to get vaccinated.
The great influenza of 1917-18, that virus is said to have gone around the world 4 times without an airplane. It's 100 years ago now. At the end of the great influenza, 50 million or 100 million had died. That's against a global population at the time less than 2/7 of what it is today. Multiply 50 or 100 million by 3, you're talking about a number of deaths that's totally catastrophic, a hit to our economy that's unimaginable. In 2006, I brought the top epidemiologists from all over the world together.
The vaccine needs at least...
And the vast majority felt that in the next 20 years, 30 years, there will be a pandemic, and it will have the potential to bring humanity to its knees.
New strains of influenza are already infecting birds in over 75 countries. And the way we are interacting with the animal world is putting us at risk. We encroach on wetlands, so wild birds mix more frequently with domestic poultry. Our food trade is completely globalized, and factory farms are growing in scope and size.
With all influenzas, there is some critical moment when a virus circulating in one species of, say, birds manages to mutate in a form that allows it to get into, say, pigs, and then from there to spread easily between people. We've seen this over and over. It's going on all the time, right at this moment. Here's what a truly horrible, worst-case scenario pandemic would look like. First, there would be a jump from some animal species to humans. The first humans would be the people close to those animals. And then their families and the kids in the schools. And it would not be regionally confined for long at all. Days, that's it. And let's assume that it kills 5% of the people it infects. Well, 5% would be hundreds of millions of human beings.
Pandemic flu will soon reach this country.
If you become sick while traveling, contact the...
So once the epidemic has really begun to spread, you can't even begin to imagine the scale of this.
You want to be as far away from the city as possible.
Come to your community and it's going to cause
You
problems.
have huge numbers of people that are not coming to work, and that includes jobs we consider essential for public safety, like the guys that turn water systems on and off, the police, the fire department. Then people start blasting their conspiracy theories out about where this disease came from, who caused it, why is it here. you would see a whole wave of shortages of goods and services all over the world. The stockouts of every single kind of drug, the overcrowding of the hospitals, the overcrowding of the mortuaries, the sheer numbers of both sick and dying. What a really severe influenza pandemic would look like is something close to social collapse.
We're not effectively prepared as a world for a pandemic. We don't have effective enough coordination and response. But the biggest thing is that the on-the-ground preparation and preparedness is full of holes. There's a pattern here of responding to an outbreak rather than investing in preparedness. Preparedness is so much cheaper, so much more cost-effective than responding after the event has happened.
Major nations around the world currently spend 10 to 25 times less on biosecurity than they do on homeland security, in spite of the likelihood of an epidemic causing even greater loss of life. We are overdue for an influenza pandemic. On average, they happen every 20 to 40 years. A lesser influenza pandemic, one equivalent to 1968, would likely now kill up to 2 million people. An influenza pandemic like 1918 could kill 200 million people, more than the entire population of Germany, Great Britain, and Spain combined. To prevent pandemics, we need to do a much better job of controlling outbreaks.
Morning.
We see few patients now,
You know here.
but the staff are better prepared now to work. They are more trained.
On my shoulder.
I think if we were just prepared back in August and September, we would have done better.
Be our guide. Always be our God. Won't you hear my people cry?
In December, we had 16, 17 patients admitted on a confirmed ward, and about 14 patients, 14 of the 17 will go home soon.
Check it. Hello, baby. You all right? How you doing today?
So with time, we got better.
How your daughter too? No fever, no sickness, everything all right now. You ready to go home today? Sure. How you feeling there, boy? Any fever? Any running stomach? Any family thing? Nothing. They'll go home tomorrow.
It's like a miracle. You see a patient till the patient is dying sick, and then 2-3 days onwards, the patient start to regain strength. It's like a plant trying to grow and get stronger each day. And then the most exciting thing is that you put the patient out of the ward, and then you remove the Tyvek, and then the patient sees you. Patient knows Dr. Moses, the name, has seen Dr. Moses Tyvek, but doesn't know the person. And then some of them start to cry. So I say, wow. It gives me joy. Yeah, it gives me joy.
See the power of God. It is my beloved. It has to be the Lord working. It is my beloved. No matter what you say, when trials come my way, I will praise your name. Amen. Amen.
Morning.
Every time we are able to help one person to stay alive and leave this danger zone, this death zone, and go home, we give God the glory, right? Yes. Now, this doesn't stop here. Staying alive is a continuous challenge. So these certificates are so that you go home and people in your community, people in your family are afraid to come around you. They think you still have Ebola and they can attack you. You can show this to them. Here's some evidence from the Ministry of Health that you were tested and treated and now you are cured. Okay? So, Steven Saka, on behalf of the Ministry of Health, the certificate says that you have successfully undergone care and treatment related to Ebola virus disease, and after post-treatment assessment, you are now declared free of Ebola through medical examination and a confirmed negative laboratory test. Amen. And this certificate is given today, the 11th of December 2014, and it's signed by me on behalf of the Ministry of Health. Thank God for you.
I want to present this certificate to you. Mama, Mama, please talk to me. This is for you. Take it from me now, baby. It's for you, yeah? So, the next.
When I see patients, I remember them. Yeah. Especially those that are sick that will really assess. I remember them. There's something in each individual body that makes that person survive, and the other person won't survive. Because you see one patient that is so sick and that patient lives, and you see another patient that is not so sick and that patient dies, then you say, why? What's the difference? They're getting the same treatment in a way, the same feeding, the same care. Why?
Não tem mais a vida que era antes da chegada de João. Minha rotina é diariamente médicos, submetendo ele a pesquisas, a intenção de que realmente descubram algo de interessante para melhorar a vida dele, a minha e da minha família. Peço muito a Deus que ele vai falar, ele vai andar, né? Vai para a escola, vai correr atrás das irmãs com uma sandália. E vai levar a vida dele praticamente normal. Normal.
João Guilherme. João Guilherme. Tá ali, ó. Na realidade, quando você passa os 9 meses de gravidez, você idealiza aquela criança perfeita, que não vai ter problema. Oi. De novo, né? Tudo bom? Pode entrar. Vamos lá. Oi, gente, tá todo babado. Enxuga aí. De repente, vem uma coisa diferente. É difícil, não é fácil.
Vamos ver se cresceu mais 1 centímetro, pelo menos.
36. É uma doença nova que muitas vezes a gente não pode chegar para a família e dizer: olha, quando sua filha tiver 2 anos, ela vai ter isso, isso, isso. A gente não pode fazer isso. Cada mês é um mês novo, a gente fala como a criança está e o que é que a gente precisa fazer naquele fase. Nem piorou nem melhorou, tá do mesmo jeito.
Só esses sustinhos que é o que está alterando. Nada mais, graças a Deus.
Mas não está mais irritado. Você vê que ele chora, não faz mais, não vai embora no choro mais como ele ia antes. Tchau. Babou tudo aí. Tchau, viu? Tchau. Obrigada aí também. Eu acho que a gente está só no começo com esses pacientes. A gente não sabe do futuro. Então, se a gente pode ajudar a tentar ter uma solução agora, isso vai beneficiar não só os países que estão passando por essa situação agora, como também outros que podem passar lá na frente.
When an outbreak catches hold, it affects every part of our lives. Business and government, trust and freedom, equity and security. The fight against epidemics can only be won if each of us does our part. It turns out we are all the front line.
I think it goes on your left side.
What if I don't want to wear it?
Oh, no!
Picture of you.
Oh, my God.
Who
created a procedure so that when people look at themselves in their iPhone?
It was in this hall 52 years ago that my life was forever changed. I felt I had been drafted into a different kind of army to fight for human rights. In 1980, smallpox was declared eradicated from the world, and so far, it's the only human disease ever eliminated by a public health campaign. If smallpox could be eradicated, we thought, what about HIV/AIDS? Can we stop SARS and MERS, H5N1 at their source and never become a pandemic? I don't dispute it's hard and complicated, but we have the tools, we know what to do. It's merely the application of public will. Go out and change the world.
How are you? I love internal medicine, but this outbreak has taught me that to help people to really make an impact, you need to be more than one very good doctor. I really would love to learn and practice health system management. I believe the health system here can be better than what it is. You know I'm coming to go away. I'm going to a different country, right? For 1 whole year. But I will call you every day, yeah? You know Papa, I love you, right? Also, everybody need to learn when it comes to health emergencies. Until the entire world is safe, nowhere is safe. Good morning, Professor Piot.
Oh, okay. How are you?
Fine.
Good to see you. What keeps me awake at night now is that we will deliver on our promises to the people of West Africa.
So we have a see?
That we will support these countries to build the systems to make sure that when there's another case of Ebola, which will happen, that it doesn't give rise to a big epidemic. The time is gone that we lived on islands or that we were protected. And there's no way to stop that. Because fighting AIDS or fighting the flu and SARS in Asia benefits people in Europe and in North America. So we need to act beyond the boundaries of our own countries.
The networks that connect us accelerate everything. The spread of ideas, conflict, people, and microbes. There is no running away. There is no wall high enough.
And what's absolutely missing, just not there, is trust. And so coming up with preparedness that looks like it could stand up to the microbes when the attack comes is really about each country carrying their own weight. Yes, we always need to be watching. Vigilance is permanent.
The hallmark of the 21st century is that our world is simultaneously more connected and more fraught. Epidemics are a test of who we are. We can use our connections for good to make the world safer and healthier, or those connections will turn on us in an instant.
We cannot just continue to be responding to every outbreak as it occurs. If we do not invest in better preparedness, we are setting ourselves up for future epidemics and pandemics that will cost enormous amounts in terms of both lives and money.
I constantly run into people who are fatalists and they say, well, pandemics are inevitable, so don't work on them. Pandemics are not inevitable. Outbreaks are inevitable. Pandemics are optional. It's our option if we will be lazy. It's our option whether we will deny the risk. It's our option
whether we will refuse to face the consequences.
We have a chance to stop something that otherwise could be horrific. But it's going to take all of us.